What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of Pointing at the Camera. I'm your host, Cody Lewis, aka the LA Car Spotter.
And I'm Lorenzo Iacomini, aka the Speedy Guidi. And guys, we got a good one for you today because we're going to talk about the differences between a sports car, a supercar, and a hypercar. Because believe it or not, a lot of people do not know the differences between the three. And the lines have been pretty blurred in these last couple of years. So,
Blurred lines.
blurred.
Roll the tape!
Roll it!
What's up, bro?
Let's start with nice and simple, a sports car. I think everyone in the car community can agree what a sports car is, right? It's a light car, generally a coupe or a convertible, that makes you laugh and have fun. It's a fun car to drive. It's not a car that you'd take the family in. It's just a fun car.
It's a sporty car.
Yes.
Tends to be two doors, like you said.
Yes.
And
like the pinnacle sports car is the Miata. That is the bread and butter.
How you slice it.
The bread and butter of a sports car. It's light. It's cheap. Sports car does not have to be expensive either.
It can
Miatas
be.
go for $3,000. You can have so much fun in them.
Exactly. But today we're kind of going to discuss how to differentiate a sports car from a supercar.
Yeah, because
how we differentiate.
Yeah, and listen, we kind of have different definitions of what a supercar and hypercar are, I guess. But I guess we should start by just saying our definition of a supercar, right? Like, this is what I came up with. I think it's kind of a loose definition, right? Things that were supercars 20 years ago aren't supercars now. But the term supercar came out kind of towards the 90s and the 2000s, right? There was nothing that was a supercar before Enzo Ferraris, Carrera GTs, Diablos, I think a little
So
before.
what we
Zondas.
commonly know of as supercars. That is not to say that like back in the 60s and 70s when they had muscle cars, they were calling them supercars.
Right.
And that was where the name came up in the first place, but then it kind of, I don't know, I guess fell off and then came back with like exotic and European and like all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think so. What a supercar has to be, the definition has to be, one, it has to be expensive, right? You can't just and not everyone can buy a supercar. That's why it's a car that is super. Generally, it's mid-engine. A supercar is always mid-engine. It's exotic. And that word, we talked about this a lot when we were writing this episode. Exotic is kind of a term that you were saying, like your parents would say about cars, but like there's three categories: exotic, muscle, and JDM. But everything's kind of
what do you when we were like, why is it exotic? Because it's like from Madagascar. Like these like exotic cars are from Italy. Like, yeah, Italy's a nice place, but like this guy is Italian. Like,
hey, I'm exotic. I have a
nothing
mustache.
Exotic about this guy. So like, yeah, I mean, I think exotic is an interesting term. Some people use European, like a European car. But
that doesn't mean it has. Yeah, like a supercar doesn't have to be exotic. It doesn't have to be from Europe.
Yeah.
Like,
well,
the current Ford GT is a supercar, and that's from America. But other things that a supercar has to be, it has to be very quick. It has to be much quicker than most things on the road. Obviously, made in low numbers. Limited production. I like to think they're angular, because in my mind, I'm thinking of a Lamborghini. Like a supercar is like pointy. You can poke your eye out if somebody back it into someone's eye.
That's
in that weird instance. Obviously loud. And I also think a supercar in a lot of ways needs to be colorful and vibrant, because that's kind of what that's like the ethos of a supercar. Like, you brought up a great point. You said earlier, well, what about a black Lamborghini? Well, obviously Lamborghini is like the pinnacle supercar, and a black Lamborghini is no less a supercar than a red one. But like, it kind of match. Like, if you're gonna get a supercar, get a color. That's just me. That's me. Disagree with me in the comments, please.
I know people are going to throw a shit fit. I'm sure we're going to be inundated with so many comments that, but
let's hope so.
I think, yeah, I believe that a supercar is generally race inspired, which is where you get that angular shape, obviously, because it's aerodynamic. So when you see a supercar, I would say that yes, it's expensive, it's racy looking, and as far as like to in order to actually qualify to be a supercar, it has to have the performance. So you can't just have like a really racy looking Hyundai Genesis,
Absolutely.
and not have the performance. And even if you have the power in that car, I wouldn't necessarily go as far as to say it's a supercar. It doesn't qualify as a supercar. Say that's reserved for expensive and
Right.
elite cars.
Hey, I'm with you on that. But I think that a supercar is more about purpose in the way that, okay, technically a supercar is a car that is super. So you take like a Corolla that's sitting right here, but you make it super-ish. You give it a big engine, you give it a super price, and you give it super tires, and you give it a super aerodynamics, and then it makes
Like,
everything.
why do we have to use Corolla? Like, what about the M3? Like that's not a cheap car,
right?
In the sense of in the grand scheme of things, it's not really like it's not a cheap car at all. It's not Ferrari prices, but it is a high performance, high powered. I guess it's somewhat limited. I don't think it's limited.
And but this we'll talk about this way more later in the episode. But
that's why these lines are blurred.
Did you say M2 or M1?
I said M3. Actually.
Okay, an M3 a current M3 will absolutely spank like a Ferrari 360 Modena. Yeah. And that was a supercar back in the day.
Totally.
So we'll kind of delve into like what that means and why, like what's going on here,
Yeah,
but that's then interesting to think about.
So then later on, like towards in like the 2000s and 2010s, came these ridiculously high performance cars, which were even crazier than those, and those are like the hypercars.
Yes, and it came around relatively recently. And brands that are conjured up when you say hypercar are what?
Koenigsegg, Bugatti,
basically
like.
So that basically
those are the
look
top
at what
three.
Look at what those cars all have in common. They have super low production. They make cars in like the 10s and 20s and third. Like they make there's 5 Pagani's on the cheap.
But even like the McLaren P1 and like the Ferrari LaFerrari.
Yeah.
And those are hypercars because they're extreme levels of performance.
Exactly. They have extremely high price tags. The performance is super high, and they use what we call cutting edge technology because it literally
the cutting edge.
Yes, if you watch Apex Story, the hypercar, they really talk about it a lot, but it's basically a manufacturer taking every piece of technology and engineering they have and putting into that one car. For Ferrari and Porsche and McLaren, that's the P1, the 918, and the LaFerrari. But for Koenigsegg and Bugatti, they only have one model, basically. So it's like everything goes into that. But you kind of get the point.
Well, that's interesting because with Ferrari and McLaren and those types of brands, they are engineering they're creating their highest level of technology, and then they're putting it in these crazy hypercars. But eventually, those technologies become cheap enough and they perfect them enough so that they can trickle down into other cars that they're making. So that every year, these cars get faster and faster. So they almost like bump themselves up a category. But yeah, like a brand like Koenigsegg, they're not really looking to turn their Koenigsegg engine into their multi-million-dollar car into.
Well, the new Gemera maybe because it's a new 5-liter and it has no. What's the thing it does? It's a new engine.
Well, it has 4 seats and
no. But the engine
but it's not like an entry-level type car.
Right.
They're not really using that technology as like the
trickle down for trickle
exactly.
down. Right.
Like Bugatti is part of the Volkswagen group, so they put their craziest engineering into a Bugatti. And then eventually all of that stuff or some of that stuff, parts of it.
Yes, So
will be in other
another
cars.
great thing, another good point to mention about hypercars is the exclusivity factor. So the richest people in the world don't want to buy, like they want to buy something that's not a Ferrari and Lamborghini because anyone who is an idiot can go out and buy those cars, right? You have to sort of,
Any idiot.
yeah. If you have a lot of money, you can go buy a Lamborghini tomorrow. You cannot just go buy a Bugatti or a Koenigsegg. You just can't. You have to wait. Sometimes some of these cars have applications. In Bugatti's case back in the day, they would turn down kings. They made cars for kings, and they turned down kings because they were just shady people. And the Ettore Bugatti didn't like them. So if you have one of those cars, it's a social status thing, and they like that, and they fly their technicians out from across the world to do your services and that kind of stuff. So
I mean, now we have these three categories. We have sports cars, we have supercars, and we have hypercars. And we've kind of alluded to this, but some of these cars that come out, like a Ferrari in 2000 that came out is not nearly as fast as a Ferrari that came out in 2018. And you can have cars now in 2018 that are faster than Ferraris from the year 2000 or before that. So cars that were once considered supercars and are still considered, in the world of cars, they're still considered like a supercar, but they're not. They don't really hold up to the current standards of supercar performance. And sports cars like Porsche Carrera, or even different levels within the 911 model range. You know, if you're talking about a Porsche Turbo, that's a $200,000+ car that goes really fucking fast, but a lot of people would still consider it a sports car, even though it is like supercar performance. Even
I'm going to stop you right. I'm going to stop you right there, though, because we'll dive into 911 because they're a very interesting topic about this whole thing. But we have a list of cars we just want to go down because we thought about it. We're like, what categories do these fit in? Because I think there's a lot of space for debate for each of these. And
the lines are so blurry.
And I can see it one way, and you can see a different way. And I think that's kind of the beauty of this whole thing. But also,
so let's bang them out. Let's talk about them.
Okay, starting
first one on our list is the Mercedes SLR McLaren. So that car is obviously a collaboration between Mercedes and McLaren. It was built with a racing engine. It was essentially, the pinnacle of the Mercedes line, and it at the time was basically pre-hypercar, but it was basically like a hypercar.
It was duking it out with supercars. It was duking it out with the Carrera GTs of the world and the Ford GTs and the Ferrari Enzos, which no one has a thought in their mind that those are supercars. Those are clearly supercars and even hypercars for the time if that term was around. But the important thing to think about is we're kind of getting into the meat and potatoes here because an SLR, the engine's in the front, and that is a huge bonnet the thing has. Yeah. And you don't want to take that on track. Like a supercar should be able to perform very well in all instances other than the motorway. Because an SLR is just Autobahn rocket, right?
Totally.
So
I heard an SLR basically is like a dressed up Dodge Viper.
I told you once that it drove so similarly to a Hellcat. Because I literally drove a Hellcat, then I got out and drove that, and I was like, this drives the exact same. It just has a Mercedes badge on it and a huge hood. But they're just squirrely. But that's besides the point.
But it doesn't have the type of performance, and even though it's somewhat race inspired, it's not like a track focused car at all.
Right. So
that.
But that's the thing. Another thing for me is that these cars, like where the engine is placed, has a big role because the engine's in the front, so it's technically a GT car. Yeah. For now standards, we look at this through our eyes now in 2020, the shitty year that has been. That's a GT. Yeah. What's the difference between that and an Aston Martin DBS. Like they're the same, like
Yeah,
they're
like a
both
GT
really
is
quick
literally
GTs.
a Grand Tourer. So it's a car that's built to just like drive quickly but straight and
For
not
long periods of time.
and not, be canyon carving, but, be comfortable and fast. And, it's got a shit ton of power, but because of the fact that the engine's in the front and it doesn't have that same level of, raceability, that's why I think it falls into the supercar range rather than hypercar.
Right, but that's another thing. Like, can GT cars be supercars? Because I don't think so.
Yeah, and I do. Because when I look at a car like the Aston Martin DBS Superleggera, I mean,
which is also on our list, which,
Yeah.
which we'll just dive into as well.
yeah, I guess we'll just hop right into that. Yeah, it's front engine, but it's 700 plus horsepower, twin turbo V12.
Yeah, so
same as a super fast. That's like insane power, but the engine's in the front, and it's definitely a GT car.
But do you consider but you said earlier you consider an A12 Superfast a supercar.
I mean, I do.
But it's the same as a DBS from 2019 with it makes actually less power.
I mean, I think that they're
Right?
both.
Yeah.
I think that they're both supercars. They're just GT supercars.
See, I think we got to designate the difference between the two because
700 horsepower is what a Pagani puts out.
Yeah, but
And
the engine's
change.
in the front and it's set up for GT, so it's not a supercar. And another great point to bring up is a Bentley Continental GT W12 makes 650 horsepower around. That's 50 down from both of those two cars, the Superfast and the DBS. So and you look at that like, oh, that's a GT car.
It is a GT car.
Why?
and I
Because it
would
has a
say
GT on the back?
I would definitely say most versions of the Continental GT are like supercars, but I mean are sports cars because they're GTs, but they're high-powered sports cars. But there are versions that are very track focused, like whatever the GT4 or something, and that thing is definitely a supercar.
See, I don't think so. And you know what? I think another facet is, I just thought about this. For me, a big part of what a supercar is comes down to the brand. And I know that's probably bad to say, but
Oh yeah,
I just simply
Bentley
don't.
doesn't have any racing history.
They do, but the cars they put out aren't supercars. Plain and simple to me. Same with Aston Martin. They haven't made supercars since this new Valhalla that's coming out, this Valkyrie. But they have race-inspired cars.
See, that's something that.
And you
right,
said earlier.
that right there, the Vanquish of previous years would have been considered a GT, where the Vanquish now, if you see the Vanquish that's coming out, that thing is a fucking race car.
Oh yeah, the mid-engine Vanquish.
Yeah, that thing is insane. So that has completely transformed.
But it's a mid-engine though.
Yeah, you're right.
See, I don't know, man. This is where it
We're
kind of
proving
gets.
our own
This is where it
points?
kind of gets
Are we
kind
stepping on our own tails?
of. But this is where it kind of gets confusing because now I'm kind of
You
backtracking.
want to get really confused? What about the 911R?
Okay, yeah, this is where when we were writing this episode, we were just like freaking out because a 911 transcends all of these words: supercar, sports car,
There's
hypercar.
sports cars. Porsche makes supercars, sports cars, and hypercars, and like a 911.
But a 911 will never be a
classify.
hypercar. Let's just focus on that first, and let's get that out of the way. There's
Yes,
no 911 that's a hypercar.
Regardless of performance, a 911 will never be a hypercar.
Right, but
Because
a 911R is an interesting case because it's a limited production car. It was very expensive. It had dealer markups like crazy. Like these are the attributes of a supercar. But it's based off of a Carrera. It's like you look at like any normal person can look at a Porsche and see 911R and like that's not a supercar. That's a
But it's
Porsche.
like all car. I mean, it's got carbon.
But it
fiber,
performs like one, and the engine's in an exotic-y place, right?
Yeah.
But to be completely honest, I thought about this after we wrote this episode, and I don't know where to put Porsche because I think it kind of comes down to the models because the Carreras anything below a turbo,
like a GT3 RS,
a GT3 RS, like that to me
is a
it's
supercar.
it's a supercar, but it kind of isn't though too.
But I mean, it
doesn't look like you.
Because it's 200,000 and not four. Or how much is a GT3
I don't know, but
RS?
for me,
because it's not 300,000 or 400,000.
right. But it's tough to call a Porsche because it looks like so spark. It looks so normal. It's a normal looking car. To call it a supercar, you know what I mean? And there's no doubt in my mind a GT3 RS and a 911R and a GT2 RS. Those are all a GT2 RS. That's a supercar. But
it's funny because no matter how much shit they put on it, stickers and wings and vents and all that,
it's still
like
a Carrera.
Sport, yeah, it's still.
You know
what
I mean? But oh my god, people are probably getting really mad about that. But
I mean,
are we wrong? I just don't know how to. I don't know really how to articulate how I think about it. To be completely honest.
So I know it's not a Carrera, but basically my thoughts when I think of like hypercars that came out of like really special cars that came out of Porsche were the 918.
You said Porsche.
I did for you. The 918, the 959.
Right.
You know that was definitely a hypercar.
Yeah.
You know, but now
it's
would
not,
you consider it a hypercar?
I would consider it a supercar.
Yeah.
Back then, it's a hypercar.
Like you have to. It's about generation as well.
Totally. And God, this is where it even gets even more confusing because
old people don't know shit about Koenigsegg's, but they will tell you that a 911 RS, is a hypercar.
Right.
You know?
I mean,
because it's a monster.
God, Porsche is such a tough case. I don't know what to say about it.
What about a Cayman GT4?
So that's another
one that we brought up, and that's that's a super high performance, even though the numbers
and the engine's in the place a supercar's engine should be. But do you see?
And
you
it's an
cannot,
exotic brand,
and you can't tell me you see a Cayman drive by and you say, "Oh, that's a nice sports car." But a Cayman GT4 is a track car with a mid-engine, with sticky tires, Limit E-ish production,
and it's an asshole ripper. Like it,
and it'll absolutely rip cars on track.
For sure.
But no one looks at a GT4 and calls it a supercar. They all call it a sports car, right? Because it's a Cayman.
Blurred lines.
But so in that case,
blurred lines.
The engine placement for me. Now I kind of backtrack on that too. Just because it's mid-engine doesn't necessarily mean it's a supercar, but because it's a Cayman though. But then I also think that since it's a Porsche, it doesn't really make it hypercar. I don't know, dude. I'm kind of freaking myself out. I drank too much coffee this morning.
No, I mean it's tough because the next one on our list is a car that we both absolutely love. And it at the time, like when I was growing up, that was a freaking supercar. I mean, it was an exotic car because we weren't even really calling them supercars, but like a Ferrari F355 is not that fast to today's standards. Like an M3 will beat that.
They're small, they're loud, they weren't really limited production.
No,
but it's a Ferrari.
You can get them now for 50, 60, $70,000, super clean.
I was telling you this. I was looking at one, dude. I need one of those cars. That'll be the first Ferrari I own. Mark my words.
But in my eyes, that'll always be a supercar, even though it doesn't fall into those categories anymore.
But if you look through our lens from 2020, that is a kind of a sports car because it's kind of small and it's a stick and it's. Hopefully it's a stick. It's kind of a fun car to drive around, but you're not taking that to track, and it's not that exotic anymore.
Car. Now it's just like a basic sports car.
But I really want to figure this out. It'd be interesting to take a poll with all these people and say, hey, how much time? Huh?
Who's Paul?
So funny. But ask a bunch of people, how much time does it take for a supercar to turn in? How much time needs to pass for a supercar to turn into a sports car? If that's even a thing. Maybe we're crazy. You know what I mean?
I don't
think.
But I don't look at it. Let's talk because the next one on our list is an even better example. The F40. So the Ferrari F40, in my eyes, I still think of it as a hypercar level car. It's in
absolutely.
I mean it's a freaking $1 million car right now. But at the time, you know, it was limited production. It was a high production for being a limited
For being
car.
what it was, yeah.
But that was kind of like a weird Ferrari thing. But they made a good amount of them. But they're still like, at the time, they were super high performance. I mean, that's a twin turbo V8. So all these people that are hating
carbon
on
fiber, big wing, angular, mid-engine
race car that was street legal.
Listen, it would be
that was a race car.
That is a hypercar to a T for the day.
Yeah,
we look at that now, and that's just a supercar.
It's a supercar
so it
in terms of performance,
right?
But in terms of like prestige, I think it falls. I still think it like deserves the hypercar prestige.
But can cars from the '80s even be considered hypercars because it's a new term? You know what I mean?
Well, yeah. I mean, that's
like what other car? Like a F1 is that's a hypercar, right? But it kind of.
But that was 10 years later.
I mean,
yeah, you're right. That's a McLaren.
I guess I
F1,
consider.
I
guess I consider an F1 a hypercar because it had like a top speed of 240, right? That's pretty.
Yeah, I mean that's hypercar shit. You know, breaking speed records is things that hypercars do, and like so to discredit that as a hypercar, that's disrespect, man.
But, I know, man. I feel like.
But like there are cars now that are just putting up numbers that blow that away. Which is like makes you think, but okay. So a great example of a car that just disrupts everything. It's not on our list right here, but it's a Nissan R35 GTR. So when that came out, it wasn't a supercar because it was called the Supercar Killer. It was priced at a sports car basically. Yeah, everyone
can get them, and it would literally smoke every supercar on a drag strip. And even on track, because it just would pull these insane lateral Gs. But now I'm looking at it, and it's a sports. It's probably considered more of a supercar back in the day, but not really. Now it's just a sports car.
It had supercar level performance, but because it was a Nissan and because it wasn't $100,000, it wasn't even $100,000. Like
not limited production. Engines in the front. It could technically be a really fast GT car if you wanted it to be, right?
Yeah, so like it's basically one of those cars that has the performance, but because of the prestige of the brand, it just doesn't make it. And it's a supercar killer because it puts up the numbers, but right there in the name, it's not a supercar, it's a supercar killer. That's it.
Yeah, man. I think since we
I'm
started recording,
I'm also not a fan of G35 or whatever they are, R35s.
You're a fan?
I'm not a fan. I don't really like GTRs.
I really want to drive all of them. To be completely honest, I mean, who doesn't? But like, I want to drive
a right-hand drive R34 just for shits and gigs. But
I've never really driven any JDM.
Not really.
But I wish I could because I feel like that's like a whole world I haven't really entered.
I want to drive like a 70s Corolla.
Like that one?
Yeah. Like I want to drive. I want to drive. That's a Honda, but I want to drive like a 70s Camry. I don't think they had Corollas. I think they had Camrys, and like they're cool. They're not supercars or sports cars or anything. They're just like cool cars. All right, we're getting off topic. What about? I mean, we kind of mentioned this, like the Demon being that it's basically the same kind of category as the GTR because it puts up the numbers. It has insane numbers, insane performance, like 700 plus horsepower, right?
Demon has 790.
Fuck 798. That's ridiculous. But that thing is not a supercar. It's like a drag car.
Moreover, it's a muscle car.
Yeah, it's a muscle car.
So that's another category. It's not a JDM. It's not an exotic, which is people call supercars. It's a
but back in the day, muscle cars were considered supercars because of their performance. But
right.
Yeah, now
we don't who in their right mind wouldn't call something with 800 horsepower that can do 0 to 60 in 2.5 seconds and do a quarter mile in like less than 10 seconds not a supercar? What madman would call it that? A muscle car and not a supercar? Me. Like I don't like. But seriously though, like
it's not exotic. It's not limited. I mean,
it is a Demon's limited, but
yeah, but it's not exotic. and it might be a special car, but it
It
doesn't
even
mean
kind of
it's a
it even kind of
supercar.
inches towards GT because it's big and comfy, and you got big old seats, and you can just rip along. Like, what's even seen that
Not
in
a
a
supercar.
yeah.
It's just not.
There's too many categories in this world, man. All these niches people are making.
Well, that's the thing is like it used to be so much easier.
It used to be pretty black and white.
And
Now it's like
performance wasn't as easy to get to. So, people were making incremental progression. And now with like the introduction of electric assist engines and all this stuff,
that's
the
another
numbers
thing.
are
Yeah.
just like bananas. I mean, these freaking cars that are coming out.
That's
that
another
are
thing.
with
That I didn't even
and
think
like
about
those and those cars like the Rimac.
Or not
like,
even that. A Taycan.
Yeah.
They're technically mid-engine. The
Yeah,
batteries
but-
are all placed in the middle,
You're right. You're totally right.
and they will spank everything.
Yeah.
But I don't consider a Taycan a supercar. I just
No, it's
consider
a
it.
freaking 4-door sedan. It's an electric sedan. It happens to be really fast.
If you brought that back even 5 years, people would literally be shitting their pants.
Yeah, pants shitting. Like, I mean, the Tesla.
Like, why isn't that a
the
supercar?
Tesla, people were shitting their pants. But to this day, I don't think anyone has called the Tesla a supercar.
That's a great point.
Like, Tesla has been putting up
You know
those
what?
crazy numbers in sedans. But, but no one is calling a Tesla a supercar.
Dude,
And
I'm gonna say it. I think a big portion of what a supercar, what people consider a supercar, sports car, hypercar, has to come down to the brand for me.
Yeah.
Sorry, my voice cracked. Brand.
Brand.
Comes down to the brand. Like,
And, like,
seriously, it really does though.
yeah.
And that's so. I hate like putting grouping cars into brands because some brands will make stellar cars and some just it just doesn't make sense. But like we said, Bentley isn't a supercar, but they have racing pedigree. They have high pricing. They have the exclusivity. They have all that, but it just isn't a supercar. So maybe that's like our bombshell to end it on, but we're not going to end it just yet because
No, I mean,
I have one more interesting. We have two more, but let's just talk about. I don't want to talk about the Urus
I mean,
because
yeah,
that's clear. People just say, "No, it's an SUV. Forget about it." But it is a
it's an
really
SUV.
fast SUV.
It puts up numbers and stuff, but it's a truck. I mean, you like a lot of these cars. Like
It's not a
any
truck.
fu-
It's a Q7 actually.
You're right. I'm gonna get chastised for that.
It
because
is. It's a fact.
It's an SUV, and the fact is, you can squeeze a lot of power into a lot of cars, and that doesn't just make it a supercar.
Exactly.
And like, it's a Lamborghini, so it's like a super SUV, but it'll never be a supercar.
So, what do you consider a?
I mean,
I
like,
already know.
those Range Rover SVs and
SVRs?
like SVRs and what is it? The
Bentley?
Jeep Trailhawk and Trackhawk,
Trackhawk, yeah.
SRT Trackhawk, like those are super performance, but they're not ever going to be supercars.
Exactly.
That's it. What about
What
what were you going to say? Because
I was
we're
going to say.
start
So
wrapping it up.
the last car we have on our list is the 570S from McLaren because I think this is going to be like the F355 because when it came out, the thing would put down wicked numbers. It was wicked fast. It won Motor Trend's Car of the Year. It's a supercar, mid-engine, angular. It's a McLaren. McLaren's always seen as a supercar, but
price point is there.
they're so commonplace, especially in LA, and they're not that expensive, especially used one. Dude, you can get a used 570 for half price or less. Like, how can that be a supercar? And in 10 years, no one's going to look at a 570, especially where technology's going. No one will look at a 570 and say, that is a supercar. Because the ethos is kind of sports car. It's fun, it's cheap, it's cheapish. You just kind of beat the shit out of it, right? But
Some
now it's a
people-
supercar. So that's like it's a
because
future
it's
sports car.
because it's the entry level McLaren. I think that it's just performance wise, it will be trumped by the next version and the next version, and it's already the 720 is just
Exactly.
an insane.
A 720 will
ridiculously
never
fast
be seen as a supercar, as a sports car though. Like a 570, there is room for it to be called a supercar.
Yeah,
Sports car,
just
sorry.
because it's entry level. But I mean, think about it. Think about it down to the numbers. They're only seconds between these things as far as speed.
Absolutely.
So it's a very fine line, but it's also a huge gray area.
So you're telling me we didn't really find anything out today
No,
from this whole conversation?
we basically didn't get anything.
I think we did. At least I'm kind of realizing, more talking this out with you, is that it really comes down to brands for me. Why does my voice keep cracking when I say brands? It comes down to a brand, and yeah, it does come down to functionality.
I think it's like a big Venn diagram kind of thing of like circles that overlap each other, and there are cars that will kind of, like you mentioned, transcend multiple categories because of their performance, but also because of their purpose, you know? So when I say that high performance and purpose and race inspired, but you're saying it's purpose built, it's like those are the things that are the gray area.
See, I think it's more of a triangle pyramid scheme here. You got muscle car, and it all trickles down. So you got your demons at the top, and then you got your scat packs at the bottom, and you got your Mustangs, and then there's the big blanket. There's
American
there's
cars
Supercar, and they all
forever be like sports cars, unless you're talking about like a Ford GT.
Right, but like you have your pyramid. So at the top, like I said, is a demon, but at the bottom it trickles down, and then you get the Camaros that they rent out at Hertz. Or Avis rent a car. Like those are muscle cars.
But those are sports cars.
Pony cars.
No, but that's still a sports car. It's a fun car. That a Camaro falls into the sports car category. It's just a fun car. It's not super high performance for a base Camaro or a base Mustang, and that's something that just falls into the sports car category. But also a 911 or like a Carrera S, a Carrera 4S, like those also fall into the sports car category. Even though they're double, triple, 4 times the price, they're still not like supercar level, allure. There's a lot of that extra super factor that it's missing.
Yeah.
So it just falls into the sports car category.
Oh, jeez, dude, my brain kind of hurts
before this guy's brain explodes.
I mean,
yeah.
So we basically didn't really come up with much today because I guess it's too gray area.
We probably started a lot of fires, and if you guys want to just comment your opinions and tell us how much of an idiot Lorenzo is for not thinking the F40 is a hypercar.
It's not.
That's what we want from you guys.
Or give us a car that you think transcends these Venn diagrams or pyramids, if you will.
Yeah.
And we'll discuss it because there are so many more that we didn't even talk about. I still think 911 still kind of just screws with me because it's a very much of a common car.
Yeah.
But it's really not in a lot of ways. Oh, jeez, dude.
Well, thanks for listening.
Wait, before we go, guys, we have merch. And when I say merch, I mean you can get our swag. So we have these affiliate links below. Get this Speed Racer t-shirt. Get these Levi jeans I'm wearing. Get these Stan Smiths I'm wearing. Dress like the Speedy Guidi, all right? All the links are below. Our camera gear, our recording, our tripods, these blue microphones, everything. My cell phone, the iPad. Coffee I'm drinking. You can get this boring black shirt and these bullshit-ass green shorts and this stupid LA car spotter hat. All of the links are below. So if you want to, for whatever reason, if you're so bored during this quarantine and you want to basically shop our stuff and redo a Coming in Clutch and look just like us, all the links are below.
Well, that's our show, and thanks for tuning in.
My name's Lorenzo Iacomini, the Speedy Guidi.
And my name's Cody Lewis, a.k.a. the LA Car Spotter.
You're watching Coming in Clutch, or you watched Coming in Clutch.
You just finished the episode. That's it.
See you later.
That's all we got for you.
I'm hella confused now, though, still.
I mean, this is an argument that will continue for
I feel like
forever.
we sound very unprofessional because we just came back and forth, but it's also no one knows.
But that's why
no one knows.
It's such a gray area.